All right, it's being 6:30, let's call the meeting to order. May I have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Barnes,
Here.
Mrs. Rogers,
Here.
Mr. Roach. Here. Mrs. Barney,
Here.
Mr. Smith.
Here.
Ms. Durig,
Here.
Solicitor Nicholas,
Here.
Solicitor Gannon. Here. Mr. Lennon.
Here.
Okay, after review, I'd like to make a motion to approve the May 20th, 2025 minutes. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Barnes,
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers,
Aye.
Mr. Roach.
Aye.
Mrs. Barney. Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Okay, this evening we have Mr. Turnley to present the findings for the 2024 audit.
Thank you for having me here this evening, everyone. As I do annually, I'd like to go over the highlights of the audit of the authority this year for calendar year 2024. I put in front of you a couple pieces of information. The thick audit report itself, you'll have that has all the information in it. But for the purposes of tonight's meeting, right inside the front cover, there's a summary, as I give the board each year, a synopsis, as I call it. It's dated for this evening. You'll know you have the right document in front of you. About halfway down, it says net position analysis. That's the document that I'm going to be talking about for the most part. And as I go along, if anybody has any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. But before I get into this, just a couple of quick comments about the actual thick audit report itself. What we have issued for the authority this year is what we've issued in past years. The independent auditor's opinion is what's known as an unmodified opinion. And basically, an unmodified opinion means that the information contained in that thick audit report is presented in conformity with our rules and regulations of our profession. There are no departures from that. So in layman's terms, as I tell the board, that's a good thing. That's the type of opinion you want to have. Also, last year and this year again, because of receiving the PennVest funding, there's a good portion of that PennVest funding that is considered federal money. And as a result of that, I have to break your audit report up into two sections. One is the numbers that we're going to talk about tonight, the regulars, and the other section is the compliance section on how you're processing those funds, spending those monies in connection with the project, the capital project. So in the back of the report, there's a section of the report dedicated for my reports related to compliance. In a nutshell, what I'm saying in those reports is that there were no findings of material noncompliance related to that program. So now, again, that's a good thing. That's what you want to have in the report when it goes to PennVest or any third party who gets a copy of your audit report. So those are two important things I just wanted the board to know about the thick audit report itself. Now, turning your attention to this synopsis, at the bottom of the page or halfway down, I give you a 5-year history of the net position. And what net position basically is if you think about it, here's all our assets, less all our liabilities, and this is what's left. This doesn't mean this is cash. What's left could be the value of your buildings, the value of the capital project that you're working on, but some of this, maybe half, is cash and investments that you have. So you can see the increase over that 5-year period. I have a couple asterisks for the previous year and the current year to tell you the main reasons for that increase. And you can see starting in 23, it was about 6.3% and almost 6% again in calendar year 2024. What will be a recurring theme in my comments as I quickly go through this is keep in mind the liquidity has over the last 2 years has had the benefit of the capital contribution from Cecil Township of $500,000 in 23 and then again in 24. And also you had the benefit of a $300,000 grant from the Redevelopment Authority of Washington County. You take those monies into consideration, they're going to impact obviously your net position and the numbers that we're going to talk about going forward. When you turn to the top of page 2, I talk about the net position, but a certain portion of that net position, that leftover money, is the net value of your buildings and equipment and the capital project, the infrastructure that you have. It's not liquid monies that you can spend. There's a portion known as the unrestricted portion, and those are funds. Those are liquid monies, cash, your investments less liabilities that you have to pay that can be spent for general operations moving forward. And so this is an important figure. This is a component of that overall net position that I talked about on page 1. So you can see a 5-year history of that, and you can see a rather hefty increase in the current year, about 2.8 million. So a significant increase from the prior year. And wherever there were major blips, again, for the sake of the board, just as a reminder and refresher, I have asterisks there telling you why those either went up or down, just as a reminder, going back for a 5-year period. When you turn to the top of page 3, the key components of the profit and loss statement, if you will, I have going across this table from left to right. And so again, you have a 5-year history of that. So if you look at 23 versus 24, the last 2 lines on that table, you can see operating revenues, a minimal increase, a little over 50,000. You see a significant increase in operating expenses from $3,160,000 to $3,802,000. I put an asterisk there just to mention to the board that the main reason for that were the increase in treatment cost that you had to pay. The rate was $8.66 in the prior year, and it went up to $11.26 per 1,000 gallons from the Canonsburg-Houston Joint Authority. That was the biggest item that caused that increase in operating expenses, and that's going to affect some of the ratios we're going to talk about in a second here. So your net operating income, you can see how that decreased from the prior year as a result of those increase in expenses. Non-operating revenues, you see $427,000. The reason why that's large in comparison to the prior year was that $300,000 grant I spoke about earlier. And then, of course, the capital contributions for the last 2 years. And you look at the net income, $1,656,000, a little in line with last year's. But again, I talk about the capital contribution of $500,000 and that grant. That's $800,000 that will go away. I'm assuming is not going to be occurring again in 2025. So your net income, that final column to the right, is going to return more to the 2022 year, the 2021 year, and that depends on the board, what the board does with their rates. But you're going to fall back into that level of net income as opposed to what you've experienced over the last 2 years. At the bottom of this are the operating ratios, the ones I like to talk about. I'll tell you what they mean briefly, and then it'll make sense on these increases or decreases. That first thing is operating ratio. What this basically says is this deals only with, has nothing to do with the capital contribution or that grant. It's only operating revenues, your sewer charges, your service charges, things of that nature, in comparison to your operating expenses. And what this says is how much of those expenses are eating up our operating revenues. And you can see in the 2024 year, it went from 70% in the prior year to the almost 84%. And again, that was due to the authority's increase in those treatment costs. So this number should be fairly consistent. You would hope that it would be fairly consistent over the year, but when you run into something like those treatment cost increase, this is what you're going to look at, obviously your cost. If you do nothing, also something that impacted this was not only the increase in those treatment costs, but your tap-in fee revenue decreased significantly from 23 to 24. So you had less operating revenue, a component of it, less operating revenue, and the increase in the treatment cost resulting in this ratio increasing this operating. So you actually would hope for it to be lower, but when you look at this, that's when the board starts to think, oh, do we need to raise rates? We're going to have more consumption coming down the road with what we're doing, whatever it is to turn this ratio around so it's a little bit lower than what it is. The current ratio is basically how much liquid money do we have to pay our current bills. So all I did is calculate your cash that you have on hand, and I was very conservative, did not take into consideration the certificates of deposit that you have at the Slovenian Savings and Loan. I just considered those investments because that's the purpose of this current ratio, is to see if you have excess money to put into investments like those certificates of deposit. So I just took where you have cash at your main depository, and I divided that by the amount of accounts payable at the end of the year, any current liabilities expected to be paid in 1 year. And you can see for 2024, 3.78%. Now, in the industry that you're in, when you Google what are industry rates for this type of entity, anywhere from 1.5 to 3 is a good current ratio to have. So you can see you're even on the plus side of that, just for informational purposes. And then the debt to asset ratio, that just kind of tells you how much debt you have. The higher you have, the higher this ratio goes, the less operating cash you're going to have, because you're going to be paying off more debt obligations. The reason this has increased over the last 2 years, as you know, is the Penvest money that you're going to have to pay back in the future, and that's causing this ratio to go up. And on page 4, I explain those ratios once again for the sake of the board. And then each year, as I tell the board, segregation of duties, because of the size of your business office, in addition to Mike, you have Shanna and the billing clerk to handle operations. Ideally in the bigger corporations, you have a ton of people doing different things and a lot of oversight. Well, when you have a staff this size, which is the staff size I normally see in the authorities that I audit, it's just, you always got to make sure that you have enough checks and balances, and one of those checks and balances to make sure the board is always receiving financial information, asking questions with regard to what the business office is doing. So it's a common comment that auditors make annually in their reports. So I just want to bring that to the board's attention. So I think everyone, for the most part, those are the highlights, as brief as I could, but I wanted to give you that synopsis, and also just as a refresher, unmodified opinion in the audit report, and no issues with noncompliance in the back of the report related to the Penvest funding. Those are the key points that I wanted to impart on the board this evening. Again, if anyone has any questions, I'll be more than happy to ask.
Any questions? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. All right, getting back to the agenda, the engineer's report, please. Mr. Lund.
Thank you. Okay, going to the monthly report. First item on the collection system contract for Village of Lawrence. We did have a field review of the contractor May 12th. We do have, he's going to be on site the next 2 days. We'll have somebody out there with him, walking through mainly complaints for him to address. So we'll be able to report back after we have that field meeting. And they're supposed to be working too. So under the wastewater treatment plant contract at the Teodori lift station, it's like the last major component. They're working through starting up miscellaneous equipment, getting closer to starting up the lift station, and then finishing up site cleanup. So we're working towards project closeout there probably in the next 3 to 4 months would be my assumption with the punch list items. He has submitted partial payment number 24 in the amount of $409,634.17. We do recommend approval. That a copy is included attachment A in the report. And then also Penvest payment request number 25. Apologies, 1 second. And the Penvest reimbursement amounts $409,634.17. On the agenda, it's $1,102,859.99. That includes the property. When you look at the packet, that's the Penvest pay request. That includes the property per acquisition purchases, giving that documentation to Penvest that you already spent that funding. So it shows like the local share versus Penvest share. So that the two different numbers, that's the Penvest share that's in our report. But we'd approve the amount that's on the agenda. So recommend that.
Could you say what that number should be again, please?
Use what's on the agenda, the $1 million.
The agenda's it? Okay.
Yeah, $102,859.99.
Okay, thank you.
Of which Penvest is going to reimburse $409,000. What's on my report, $634.17. That's the
All right,
difference.
thank you.
Okay. Traditions of America, they are continuing sanitary main line. No bond reduction received. Did receive like a technical question tonight from their engineer that we'll take a look at it on piping modifications, so we'll see what that is. Silver Creek had some communication with them. There's a letter we're going to issue on some of the piping changes that, in accordance with what you had approved a couple meetings ago on standard details. There's a couple things that they have proposed that we won't accept because it doesn't meet those requirements. So.
Minimal, though, I take it?
What's that?
Minimal?
It's a ductile iron thing, so they had in the fill sections, they showed partial ductile iron between manholes with PVC. In the cut sections between manhole to manhole segments, it should be one segment of pipe, just ductile iron, instead of trying to transition piping. So they could do additional manholes or just do the entire line segment ductile. Then there's one steep section, they were showing PVC pipe, it was like 35% slope with concrete anchors. Your rules, it's ductile iron with concrete anchors, so those are the changes. So they should be able to move forward pretty quickly if they make those changes. Steel Town, we did receive from Mike their planning module, so we are reviewing that. That'd be the first step for them. Mount Pleasant,
They put escrow up?
And they gave us $5,000 for the pre-planning escrow. I just had correspondence from him today wanting to get a budget together for inspection, what he thinks we're going to estimate inspection costs were for his budget. So I'll get with you, Larry, to try to figure it out. But it's going to vary because it depends on how much work they're doing and how much they'll be out there.
we'll look at what they submitted and compare it to previous plans, because you're trying to estimate how fast their contractor will work and how long we'll be out there, because we're out there whenever they're installing, but it could vary with their rock, how fast they move. Mount Pleasant. So we did have a follow-up meeting with Mount Pleasant on June 10th. Discussed technical and non-technical items regarding their completion of the feasibility study. One of the outcomes from that meeting, they are going to send us their design plans for that area so we can see the sewer alignments, see the elevations, and tie that down to the concept plan that we did to make sure those elevations work. And after that, we may decide we want to go out with a GPS and get some survey shots to make sure, because it's pretty flat. So we want to make sure we have enough grade to do this by gravity, or if we have to talk pump station. I think they had planned a pump station pumping the other way for that area. So we'll get the plans off them. They're to send us that. We haven't received them yet. So
Who's their engineer? That they're-
KLH.
Okay.
Clifford Road, that's one we're waiting on the pre-developers agreement, so that's on hold. Fleer and Ridgeview sewer evaluation. So earlier today, we did have the bid opening for the CCTV program. That was the separate handout. It was just today, so we're going to be reviewing these bids. We'll come back next month with a recommendation. So 3 bids were received. The base bid, and when you see in bold, that's the total for each bid amount. So the base bid for Fleer and Ridgewood, Robinson Pipe Cleaning is the apparent low bidder, $139,425. You can see 3 bids were received. The 2 lowest bids had a closer spread. The third bid was much higher. We did have a stated allowance if there's any bypass pumping required, and it's the same. We write it in there as a fixed cost. So if we need to do bypass pumping while they're doing the CCTV. Then there's an add alternate, so you could award the base bid or the base bid with the add alternate. And that's what we'll talk about next month. Looking at your budget too, I think Mike had enough, there was enough in your budget to do both this year, so.
I think I set aside $225,000 for cleaning and CCTV work for those 2 sections.
Okay.
Yeah. So for the Interceptor, and this would be all the Miller's Run Interceptor, the add alternate from Robinson Pipe Cleaning was $61,010. So we do a lot of these contracts, so we're going to compare these against other unit prices to make sure these numbers are in line, and then we'll make a recommendation for the next meeting, because there's a large spread.
You concerned? Yeah, so you concerned about the spreads?
Yeah. Look at the unit costs. I mean, I want to take a look at it before we make a recommendation, take a closer look at it. So get
Is
it on the
part-
agenda too.
Part of your evaluation, a scope review to see what they have and where they may have missed, or is that part of what you may do?
Well, it's a unit-based contract, so, I
They
mean.
look at the same drawings?
Same drawings, yeah. Well,
Did
it's,
they add any assumptions?
I mean, it's a big,
Yeah, they do, Robinson Pipe, they do a lot of this work.
Yeah.
So, I don't have too much, I don't have any experience personally with jet services. Insight Pipe, they do a lot of this work also.
At Interceptors, somebody looked at
So.
something different.
Yeah, the first two are relatively close, but their
Comparable.
units are.
Yeah, it's the Interceptor that's concerning.
Right.
Yeah, somebody's not seeing something.
Yeah.
And if they missed it, and it gets closer to where the others are at, then it's a,
Right, I mean, when you look at the unit prices, they're pretty similar to what they had for Fleer and Ridgewood. And it's about the cleaning, like how much grit they think you'll see. You're a separate sanitary system. If you're a combined system, they'd assume, well, there's gonna be a lot of grit and debris they'll have to remove. They may have made the assumption there isn't much.
has Robinson done anything for us in the past that they have knowledge that the others may not have? Like,
Not
are
that
they
I'm
more familiar
aware
with
of.
us than others?
We've had Robinson out just to do spot work here and there if we've had a line plugged to do some jetting. If we've had some issues where we want to do some camera work, that's what we've had them out for. But as far as since I've been here, we've never done anything major with them. And I don't know if we've ever done any type of major televising or cleaning in the past as well, so I'm not sure.
All right, enjoy, have fun. Oh. Yeah,
Okay?
Yep.
All right, so we'll report back next month on that.
it is nice.
Miller's Run Lift Station Emergency Bypass Outfall Repair. We did receive some comments from DEP during their technical review. We resubmitted that, so we're waiting on that permit. Once we receive
Hopefully
the
that's a
permit.
good sign.
That's a good sign, yeah. So, those permits typically, I'd say 60 to 90 days before we have the permits from when we submitted it. And we submitted this one in May, early May, so, yeah, it is a good sign. That's pretty quick to get comments, so. Cherry Brook Lift Station, so we did have a walkthrough with Mike. We have a survey scheduled for the week of June 16th. We're gonna go through a final scope with Mike. We talked about some equipment conceptually when we submitted the first grant application, and after talking, based on the debris you see there, we're gonna pull out one of the pieces of equipment. It was decided it's not really needed. Unneeded expense, so we're paring down that scope, so. Grants, so we revised the report. I took off all those little grant paragraphs. We just have one summary table. So you have the Washington County LSA Cherry Brook. I'll remove that next month because that was already awarded. And then you have 4 that you're waiting on the funding agencies for a decision. So 2 under statewide LSA, which we should hear in the fall. Small water and sewer you just filed, but they had advised that they're going to award that this fall also. And the watershed, likely looking at winter awards for those grant applications. So I guess last update for today, rules and regulations. So we did have during the rules committee, we looked at a draft standard detail package last week. Had some changes. We're making those changes. Those will be finalized here this week. Just had some technical issues. Wasn't able to get them done before then. But that'll be it for the standard details. It was a draft package we looked at the previous committee meeting. So made it all Cecil Township Municipal Authority, took your old details, rolled in those requirements, and really expanded it, include grinder pump details, low pressure force main details, grinder pump advising it would be the property owner that owns any grinder pumps that are installed in accordance with the standard details. It would be incorporated as an attachment to your rules and regulations. I'm talking with the solicitor's office, so, yep.
Do you feel like there'll be any need for additional ordinance changes?
Ordinances, no.
Okay.
This will all just be guidelines and standards for construction that'll be attached and referenced within the rules and regs. So as the rules and regs update, we'll also have to evaluate whether the standard details can be updated as well.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Any questions? All right, we've got some motions here. Do I hear a motion regarding contract number 21, STP1, rebid Village of Lawrence Sewage Plant, Treatment Plant? A motion to approve partial payment number 24 in the amount of $409,634.17.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Roll call?
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers? Mr. Roach?
Aye.
Mrs. Barney,
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Do I hear a motion on Penvest payment requisition to approve requisition number 25 in the amount of $1,102,859.99?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Roll call vote?
Mrs. Barnes,
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers,
Aye.
Mr. Roach,
Aye.
Mrs. Barney,
Aye.
Mr. Smith.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Nicholas, can we have the solicitor's report?
Yes, thank you. In light of the engineer's comments, the item on my agenda would be deferred then for the rules and regs. Also, I wanted to note that under the Lawrence project, a couple of items worth comment. The meeting that I'm still looking to get with our appraiser, Gary Bodner, hasn't taken place yet. I'd mentioned that he had some health issues and we're still trying to get that arranged, site meeting so that he could do his final review. So that's still pending. And I spoke with Mike briefly as we get closer to the deadline for connection. We'll be presumably put in a position for those that don't connect, having to enforce the connection. And I just wanted to make clear that at least my understanding is that in the event that we have folks that can't connect, that the plan generally is to take those individuals to the magistrate. I believe that's still the wisdom of the board, and we have a little bit more time before we have to address that. But Mike brought up, and I think it's worthy of just a little more comment, that in the event that we do go to the magistrate, generally speaking, we put the matter in the hands of the magistrate for enforcement, to the extent that the magistrate can secure enforcement, fine. Sometimes the magistrate will defer for a period of time, giving the property owner additional opportunity to connect. But beyond that, what we had done in the past is to enter into an agreement that would run with the land, and then we would then work out an arrangement for getting that work done, and then leaning the property and having a lien perfected that would carry. There aren't a lot of other options, and there's perhaps some creativity that can be arranged through the magistrate on a case-by-case basis, but just wanted to let you know that that's drawing closer. And before we would file anything or put the board in a position of filing these claims, we would obviously talk about it. We'd have time at a meeting to address how many, what the circumstances are, et cetera. So I just wanted to mention that. Also, one other item for public comment on the CHJ litigation, for everybody's benefit, that has settled in principle with paperwork to follow. One item involving Cecil Township. For everyone's recollection, the way we had arranged it is that the 3 municipalities and 2 authorities will now have the right to appoint a non-voting board member to the CHJ board. The mechanics of how we do that, again, to be determined with finality, but the sense would be that there has to be a collective decision, not that one community goes first and the next community goes next, et cetera. But in North Strabane, and recall that there's North Strabane Township, Chartiers Township, and Cecil Township. 2 authorities, Cecil Authority, North Strabane Authority. North Strabane Township has decided that they are going to delegate the process, if you will, of appointing to the authority. With Cecil Township, and I would imagine that'll be on your agenda, that I talked to their manager and explained the situation, and he was going to bring that up to the board as to whether or not Cecil Township would want to keep the responsibility of recommending or selecting a board member for the CHJ board, or whether they would delegate it to this authority. And again, North Strabane Township has already decided that they are delegating that to their authority.
And you've communicated that piece to Mr. Janusa?
I did.
Okay.
So I just want to let
So
everybody.
it should probably be on the July 7th? Is that the date?
That'd be my understanding.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
So Darlene, I mean, that's a call that the township would make. It seems to make sense, since it's the authorities principally involved in it, it would make sense, like, to do what North Strabane Township did, but.
Did you take that up with Tommy
I
at the
did.
last meeting?
Yeah. I just gave him a heads up
So
that
is he-
Ramel would be contacting.
And I
the board.
offered to, I said that I'd come to the, just as I said I would, I'd come to the workshop, or if they needed any explanation and talk to anybody, I offered that too. So,
Yeah. He-
okay?
No comment, you know. he
Should
had-
I bring it up to Tommy and ask him if it's gonna be on the agenda?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that would,
I think
yeah,
that'd be
that would be
great.
good.
That'd be good.
Thanks,
It would-
Darlene.
To be honest with you, it would make it easier if it was authority and authority.
I agree with you.
You know what I mean?
100%.
And then the Cecil Township, or, excuse me, Chartiers Township doesn't have an authority.
Right.
But it would just streamline it a little bit.
Right.
And by the way, just as a footnote, one of the engineers from HRG Engineers for North Strabane Authority, who's also a resident of North Strabane, threw his name out and said he'll volunteer to do it if they want to. I mean, he's not pushing it, but he said he would do it. He would take the 5-year term. So, but that's to be determined. We'll see what names, depending on how Cecil handles it, whether it be the township or this board, you can offer a name or not offer a name. Chartiers may offer a name, may not, and Strabane has presumably going to be offering one of those engineers. So that's it. The Mount Pleasant matter has been covered, and that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
So we're not making the motion that's on the agenda this
Correct,
evening?
you could just skip it.
Okay. Okay, Ms. Durig, Business Manager's Report.
All right, this month, financial reports are for April 2025. Are there any questions? Nope. All right, since our last meeting in May, we have received 35 more tap-in applications for Lawrence. That brings a total to 80. We've issued a total of 73 permits. From the permits that we have issued, 26 have been inspected. And then we still have like 7 permits that are being held that we're still waiting on drawings or any other issues that we're having.
Okay, so about 30%.
That's it for me.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Zrencheck, Authority Manager's Report, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just under old business, the Cherry Brook renewal, still nothing. It's under review, but no changes on that. L&S Wastewater, the Monaco plant acquisition request. The owner did call me this week to get an update on the status of the CCTV evaluation. There are 2 owners. One owner understands that he is responsible for getting this done. The other owner is calling me wanting to know when I'm going to get it scheduled to have it CCTV'd. Like you said, again, without that, I can't make a recommendation to the board one way or the other, because he's getting anxious. But again, until we see exactly what's going on underground, it could be one of those things. Everything's in great shape, and it might make sense to take it over. If everything's not in great shape, and you're talking besides upgrading the plant, if it needs modernization plus repairs to the system, you could be taking on an albatross. So it's one of those things. Until I get that, there's really nothing to do with that. So I'll reach out to him and see what his plans are. The equalization tank pump at the Cherry Brook sewage treatment plant that failed, it's been received, and we have it installed, and everything is operational. Under new business, we're working on completion of the notice of termination for the Teodori wastewater treatment plant to get that submitted to DEP. Once I get that together, I will send that over to LSSE, just take a look at it, because I think you have to do something, Larry. There's that the engineer signs off on, so.
Yep.
Okay. We did receive a draft copy of the NPDES permit from the DEP for the Village of Lawrence wastewater treatment plant. Now, Larry, you were copied on that as well. From what I see, it doesn't look like there's any changes because we really had no data because the permit had to be submitted before the plant was online. But they actually did look at March and April's data just to see, but it doesn't look like anything changed. So it's just a matter of I have to advertise that and, it's, if everything's good, that's one more permit that's done for 5 years, so. Item 3, the 2010 Ford pickup that we kept as a plow truck, it's past its life. It's not gonna pass inspection. I'll need to replace that. I'm researching a replacement vehicle. We did set funds aside in the capital budget for a service truck. So I'll come back to the board once I take a look at this and see what's what with that. And then item 4, 132 O'Hare Road, potential connection to the sewer system. Mrs. Barney, you brought this up last month. A resident reached out to you about this. I did do some preliminary research on this. I did speak to him, I'm probably thinking last year at some point in time. From what I can see on the maps, but we're going to confirm this before we say yay or nay, where he wants to go up the Fieldstone Drive, if you look at the profile where he comes out, his elevation is about, if I'm not mistaken, it's around 1100 or 1145. And to get up the Fieldstone Road, you're going to end at 1168, so that's all uphill. To get up there, he would have to do a grinder pump, he would have to do something there. But again, if you would do that, you're kind of into the same thing on Clifford Road, where you'd put that out on the main road. Now, all those residents are able to connect to that, and it can be where, now that's our line, we take care of that. There is a sewer line that does run down from Fieldstone Drive, down towards down O'Hare Road to pick up over at one of the plans, but it actually goes behind the houses that are there, and there's easements and different things through there. So that would be one of those things where if he had a good relationship with a neighbor, he'd have to go across, get an easement for the yard. It's not that it can't be done, but we have to do a little bit more research. So, but I did dig into it, and that's kind of what's going on there. I guess it would be, is it cost efficient? That would be the big ticket item there. I did have a brief conversation with Ramel before the meeting started. I do have a contractor that is doing the lateral installations for the residents at Lawrence, the potential customers. We are getting complaints from residents about his sloppy work. The township has been involved in this. I had a conversation with the manager today that he's getting phone calls because this contractor is putting dirt in neighbors' yards, doing different things. While we didn't hire him, I have no say in it. I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't overstepping my bounds to call him and say, hey, we're getting a lot of complaints on this. You need to tidy up a little bit more, that sort of thing. But it's a waste of our time, chasing these calls, but it's just unacceptable that that's going on where he's going. But again, that's a neighbor to contractor dispute. It really doesn't involve us, but I just don't want to put the authority in a bad situation by saying, hey, we're getting a lot of complaints. This particular contractor, I've had complaints about him going all the way back to in February before we even issued the letter. So this is kind of a ongoing thing with him, so.
What's your recommendation?
I
Excuse
told
me,
him that
Ramel.
for obvious reasons, it has a ripple effect on our citizens and, what protests they may have against work or mop-up work that our contractors are doing. I don't see anything wrong with calling him out and mentioning that there are these complaints. Obviously, Mike's hands are tied, but perhaps coming from his position that'll, shake him up a little bit, or at least let him know that there's municipal eyes watching him now, So I don't have a problem with it. It's just unfortunately Mike's hands are tied.
Right.
Is any of this permitted work, or is this a non-permit activity?
It's supposed to be on private property, and there
But he's
wouldn't.
not, the township doesn't require a permit for
I
what
don't
he's doing.
believe so. I don't believe so.
Because that would be one way to control it, is to deny him any
So-
permits further to
Yeah.
But I think
mitigate the.
typically, if it's what I think, if it's private plumber or, coming in to just
Right.
make the connection. I don't think, they don't.
But he is in the
permit
right of way.
one-by-one.
He's working in our area though, right? Cause it's gotta tie in, so he's hitting, where's the mess at? Is it in the property or is it out at the street?
It's in the property and out in the street. Now,
Oh, so
where he's
it's
putting
just
dragging
sloppy.
mud on the street, the township can address that, and they have. It's just, I can't go in there and say, okay, neighbor A over here isn't a part of this project, but he's dumping dirt up against their garage, or he's tracking through their yard without permission, that sort of thing. I can't stop that. It's just, I just wanna make sure that I let him know that, there are complaints going on, and, he needs to tighten it up because, I mean, all I can say is, but I get calls and, the township asked me if there's anything I can do, and there's not, and it's really one of those things. So that's kind of where I just wanted to make sure I wasn't doing something I wasn't supposed to, other than say, hey, get your act together.
Hey, Brad, one thing, I don't know for sure that they don't have to get some application process when they break ground for the township for that. They
It
don't
seems like
with
the
the
township may
authority.
have more authority on this than us because
Yeah.
it's sort of like
For
a public
sure.
works.
But I don't think that we would know whether they needed to get a permit by now.
No, because basically, the end of the day, the only permit that we issue is the tap.
Right.
Right.
The tap, that they paid, and so they can go ahead and proceed with the work. Mostly, it's neighbor to neighbor dispute, neighbor to contractor dispute, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
That's all
if you feel that that's appropriate and you should do that. go ahead.
Yeah, I think I'm just gonna say to him, because there's some other things that are going on with him. The other day, he's not following our rules as far as what we set out for the inspection and the specs and things like that. So I feel it kind of all ties together, because that's how I can start it off is, hey, you're not meeting these things, you're asking for partial inspections. You have problems here where our inspector's coming out, you're failing the air test. Well, again, I shouldn't be paying for a retest because you're expected to have this, so there's those kind of issues I can address, and then just tack that on when I'm on there. We're getting complaints about, sloppiness and things like that. I mean, that's,
Sure.
so.
Okay. Mike, can you tell us a little bit more about the motion that's on the agenda tonight for the,
Yes, I can tell you a little bit
Resolution?
more about the motion. If you remember last month, there was a brief discussion about, you asked if there was any feedback that we ever get. You asked Mr. Lennon if there's any feedback we get from the agencies on, where they're at with the grant. Well, we applied for those grants, and you have to send the resolution. So back in November of 2024, we did 03 and 04, which was respectively the improvements to the Cherry Brook plant, and 04 was for the second phase of the Lawrence project. Well, that was submitted, and the gentleman from DCED reached out to me and said, hey, the wording that was in those motions, what the program was called, was incorrect, and he wanted us to just amend that wording. So what I did is I took that wording that he wants in there, I sent him over drafts of what the changed wording proposed is. He said, that's perfect, all we need to do is resend those over. But I talked to Pat about if we needed to do new resolutions or just amend the existing resolutions, or amending the wording for the resolutions. That's what that's for.
did you provide us that wording?
Yes, the wording is, here I have them here this evening. Basically what it is it said that it was a Category 4 grant in the amount of $602,000. He wanted that changed to, be it resolved that the Cecil Township Municipal Authority of Washington County is requesting a local share account statewide grant in the amount of $602,550. That was the wording he wanted changed.
Okay,
So that was the only change that needed to be made.
all right.
In talking with Mike, it's my understanding that the resolutions we pulled were from the agency itself. It wasn't our drafting. So, and then they made the request for the language change. And given that this board had already adopted both of the resolutions that contain the language request, we felt a motion to amend the language and send that over to the agency was appropriate.
Okay. Anybody have any questions about that before we make that motion? Okay. Do I hear a motion to approve the requested language change by the Commonwealth Financing Authority pertaining to Resolution 2024-03 and Resolution 2024-04, and to authorize Manager Zrenczek to send updated resolutions to the Commonwealth Financing Authority?
I'll make that motion.
Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers?
Aye.
Mr. Roach?
Aye.
Mrs. Barney?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
All right.
Thank you. Any correspondence?
No.
Okay. Any committee reports?
I think the only other thing out of rules and regs that we wanted to circulate by the board this evening, we've preliminarily talked about exploring a fog program for the authority, fats, oils, and greases.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pretty significant endeavor, one that Mr. Nichols, I'm sure, can comment on as well. We're working on it in a couple other municipalities. Some people are more sensitive to it than others because it has a pretty far spanning reach.
We can't hear you. I'm sorry. Can you speak at the microphone if, thank you.
So with regard to the FOG program that we're considering, we wanted to check with the board tonight to see if that is something that you all are in favor of us exploring. And if so, we could take the next month or so and come up with a proposal for board review about what that program might look like and how it incorporates into our rules and regs. And due to the significant reach and effect that it would have on the township, we wanted to do that first before running down that path as a rules and regs.
Yeah, just a quick aside, in Unity Township, Westmoreland County, they're updating their rules and regs, and they are pressing a FOG program. It's a prickly program because you likely will have to inspect restaurants. You'll have to tell restaurants that they have to install a grease trap in all likelihood outside of their premises, not an under the sink one, which isn't favored. Just as an interesting note, not to keep you, but in Rostraver, where they recently implemented a FOG program, they have a resident of Rostraver, Westmoreland County, who just retired after 35 to 40 years with the Allegheny County Health Department and volunteered, and all he did for the health department was grease. That's what he did his entire career. And he said in Allegheny County, unless it's impossibility of performance within the city, they mandate that you put a tank outside of the property. And that in doing that, it's a potential hardship for some folks that don't have a grease trap. Well, in Unity, they were challenged recently in Westmoreland County Court that went up to the Commonwealth Court by a brewery named Four Seasons, who took a position that they had an under-the-sink grease trap and that they felt a variety of arguments, but one of them was that that requirement was onerous. It went before Judge Smale, and Judge Smale ruled in our favor in Westmoreland County, went up to the Commonwealth Court, and then they gave up. They, I guess, briefing the law. So you have the authority to impose the grease trap requirements. It's a function of manpower, also how important it is to with your system. Typically, whether it's Allegheny County or whether it's a municipal plant, they don't want grease in the system. It wreaks havoc, right, in the system. So it's Pat's exactly right that there's an impact in the township. In Unity and in Rostraver, they bit the bullet and said, well, look, we know that there are going to be people coming to the municipal meetings complaining, coming to the township and complaining, but on balance decided to go forward with the program. So again, I bring that up by way of kind of a footnote to this whole thing, that if you do embark on a FOG program, there's political fallout to that. okay? So, and in addition, in fairness to your management, you know, in your manpower, you know, you have to deal with it. I mean, if you have a program, how do you police it? How do you, now, there are programs now, you would know much better than I, Larry, because in one of the communities, Lennon Smith is the engineer, and there are software programs now to make it much easier to monitor and have reports come in, et cetera. But I appreciate you bringing that up, Pat. And, you know, Roseanne, I think we could put together a proposed overview for the board to consider, but it would need to go hand in hand with the consideration that there is impact on your citizens. And in addition to that, there's impact on Mike and his staff.
But there's more to it than just grease traps, right? I mean, you're just giving us one component of it. There's other things.
Right. But I was just saying, that's where it hits people.
Yeah, I mean, but that can be activated to future construction and maybe not necessarily have to go backwards.
Manufacturing, different.
I think it's important that we explore this because there are businesses asking what they're supposed to do. So we have to have something in place
Yeah.
on what we believe that should be and what is fair and what is going to keep our system in good condition, and not having people just throwing grease in and no way of compensating for that.
You know, what you find in growth communities is that in time, you're gonna have more restaurants, you're gonna have more of that. And I guess the wisdom seems to be, at least in Ross River and in Unity, that is by way of example of a growth community, that they crack down on it and they don't want the grease in their system.
Yeah, it falls on us as it degrades the system, so I mean, and it's very easy to circumvent one that's under the sink versus one that's in the ground. There's one that's easier to get around, but it's still on the owner to manage and maintain them.
Right.
And we really don't go back and check on that, you know.
What Allegheny County does is they have inspections, but with new software, you can also have people have to submit their reports of
Okay.
inspection, et cetera. It is nuanced,
Yeah.
but if that's the case, then we have some helpful examples of, you know, and not every community does exactly the same, but Roseanne, I guess, is the head of the committee, if that's what you think we ought to do.
I definitely think we need to explore
we'll
it
do it.
and have
think so.
something in place for, you know, how our current customers are handled and how new customers are handled and
Yeah,
the
right
best
now
way
we
to
don't-
move forward.
We have no guidance sort of right now.
There's
no.
just like one sentence in
Yeah,
rules and regulations. It's very vague.
Yeah.
So there is no real standardized fog program. It's something that we can change it to what
Develop
we
to our
believe.
needs. It could
Correct.
be based
It's
on
it's suitable for our
usage.
community,
Right.
and yet
You
still
know.
protects us. I think that's important.
And it's equally important as everything that's already been discussed, there also needs to be a component in there about uniformity of enforcement.
Right.
Because if it does go to a court, or it is challenged, that's one of the first things that courts have looked to, is the uniformity of enforcement, the uniformity of who's being inspected, and they're gonna need to see evidence that it's not just targeted, enforcement.
What does that stand for again? Fog? Can you repeat what that means?
Fats, oils, and greases.
Okay.
And what we'll do is we do over the years, if we start a televising program like we started, or potentially we'll be starting here with Flair, you'll be able to see this when they clean it and they do whatever, and you'll start to see if you have a lot of, you know, grease, fats, that sort of thing in there, you can kind of see what's there, and then you can kind of start to tailor what you need to do, you know, from there. It'll be interesting to see how many restaurants we do have, you know, that sort of thing. It's good to look at it. It's worthwhile exploring, and, you know, we can always, like Pat said, you can, and Aaron, you can always tailor it to what we need, you know. I have no problem exploring it. It's just something, it's very vague. I agree with Roseanne. It's very, very vague what's in there.
Is part of our evaluation of the system, do we look at it that way? Like, take for instance the new pickleball court. Is there something on the evaluation that looks at the demand, the use? Like, because if you have a very low volume, small facility, versus a large restaurant with 3 fryers. I mean, that's a difference, right? So do we look at it that way even when we evaluate?
You can, that's to your earlier point, you can adjust.
But we don't do that now, though. So
You
like when
don't
we
do
look
it.
at the pickleball court, we didn't sit there and ask them, what are you sort of doing?
We
And
did take into consideration whether there was going to be food or not.
Yes. as
like a
far-
3-bowl sink just doesn't kick it off anymore. I mean, do we look at it deeper than that? I'm sorry, Mike.
Yeah.
That's why
That's
we
what we
need
think
to
we
look
should-
at
that's
it
why-
and-
yeah, we
and-
should be doing
and
this.
set parameters.
Yeah.
Now, see, would you, if, let's say a McDonald's or a Burger King would come in, as a matter of course, they install, because they just know that's the right thing to do.
they get it.
But we've had situations in Westmoreland County where you have a big nursing home that has come in with a kitchen and didn't make appropriate conditions for the grease. And, you know, if you don't have that as one of your rules, you are playing catch up on some of the folks, that's all.
Or an organization that has a function once a month. You know, how do you handle something like that? We just want to make it so that it is fair to our customers, but, you know, maintains our system. And so that they know.
Yeah. Well, I trust that the Rules and Regs Committee will address that. I just want to make sure that we're looking also at the timing and the budget, you know, how much time is spent. It's important to do all of these things, but can something be done succinctly, get finished, get our documentation in place, and then can we execute on it?
Yeah.
So-
Agree.
But Brad, to tie back to your question about when, about the pickleball court, when they do the commercial application, it does have on there, will it be a restaurant? Will you be doing whatever? They have to fill out that application. But again, as we saw with the pickleball court, originally it was just a pickleball court. You bring your own food in. Then it's supposedly a banquet hall. So it's a moving, so that's what you run into there. But no, we try to see what, if they're considered commercial, that is on there to ask what they're doing if it is there. So, I mean, it's not, but we don't have anything in place to really police that, so.
Okay. Any other committee notes? We're all good there? Okay. Moving on, do I hear a motion to approve transfer of funds for payment of expenses and invoices, payroll, and payroll taxes?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Barnes?
Aye.
Mrs. Rogers?
Aye.
Mr. Roach? Mrs. Barney?
Aye.
Mr. Smith?
All right.
Okay, I take it no comments from the floor. Is there a need for executive session this evening?
Not for me.
No. Okay, moving on. I will make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.
Okay, thank you.